Thank you, Ms. Pratt, and good afternoon to all of the families that are a part of today's presentation. We want to say thank you to you, and we know that this is a topic that is very important and near and dear to your hearts, and your willingness to give up your afternoon for this hour really speaks volumes to your commitment to your children and to their education. I'm very glad to be joined by Ms. Pratt, who is our Chief Schools Officer, by Ms. Laura Edward, who is our Principal, Ms. Allison King, who is the Director of our Specialized Services, as well as Jordan Pina, who is our Chief of Staff. And I want to commend Ms. Pratt and Ms. Edward for the work that they put into this presentation, Ms. King and Ms. Pina for their efforts as well. As Ms. Pratt said, it is our goal that we will be done by 2 p.m. today. You can use the chat feature or the Q&A feature of the presentation to be able to ask questions. There will be a point at the end of the presentation where we will answer them for you, but we again thank you for taking the time today. So this is our meeting to talk about our school reopening plan. Our agenda for today is that we would do introductions, that we would frame the meeting, that we would talk about the plans for bringing people into the building, so those people are both students and staff, plans for what it would be if the virus told us that we needed to be fully remote, what that might look like. We want to give you some assurances and the timeline for decision making, and then, as I said, there will be an opportunity for questions and answers. In terms of why we're here, we know that the coronavirus really did impact all of us at multiple levels. So it's something that we're dealing with worldwide. We're dealing with, especially here in America and in New England and Massachusetts in particular, the coronavirus has wreaked havoc in our lives. So back in March, when we made the decision that we were going to be out for 2 weeks, we didn't know that we were going to be out for the remainder of the year. And now, 4 months into this pandemic, almost 5, we know more about the virus. We know more about student learning. We know more about ways in which we're going to work. And so we are coming to you with a plan for what the new normal, the new next might indeed look like. And so we want for you to know that we have some guiding principles that have really instructed the way we have put together our reopening plans that are due to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and that one is that safety is the most important thing. We don't want to do anything that's going to put anyone at risk. That's you, that's your children, that's their teachers and staff, that's your families and extended families, that's all of us. So safety is number one. We know that we are a charter school, and we are here because we want to provide your children with the highest quality education possible. And we know that when we made the decision to be at home for 2 weeks, that ended up being the rest of the semester, that the quality of instruction that you saw and that we saw was not all that we had imagined it to be. And so we know that we want and are working hard to ensure that the high bar of academic excellence will be met through a distance learning, a hybrid model, or in-person model that will be socially distant. And so we want to educate our students. And we want to impart knowledge to students that they can affect change in our society. We believe very deeply in our citizenship mission and the work that we're doing around diversity, inclusion, citizenship, and equity that Ms. Pina is leading. And we know that part of the challenge that we have seen with this virus is the lack of national leadership on this issue. And while our local leadership and our mayor and then our governor has been quite strong, this is a problem that is ravishing the nation. Sadly, some 150,000, nearly 160,000 people have lost their lives, and nearly 5 million others have been impacted. And so we know that our students need to learn the ways in which they can advocate, that they can be advocates, that they can use the system and learn the system, and that the world that we are leaving them would be stronger because they are a part of it. And so all of those things are our consideration as we go through. And so we believe that it's important to do all 3 of these things well, and we believe our plans, whether we were to come back in person when coronavirus allowed us to, or whether it is to be hybrid, meaning that there would be some students in person, some students working remotely, or if the epidemiology said that we had to be 100% remote. We believe that all 3 of these things must be prioritized and must be our focus. On our next slide, I just wanted to again talk about the process for asking questions. This session contains fundamental information needed to understand our 3 models as well as our health and safety protocols. At the end, there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions through the Q&A feature, and any unanswered questions will be answered through whether an additional session like this one or in an email. So we've had 2 emails to you already, including the one that included the link for today's meeting. We look forward to doing another email mid to end of next week. So anything that we don't get to today will be answered in that format. Next slide. So Ms. Pratt, I turn it to you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. So again, I'm Sonia Pratt, I'm Chief of Schools, and I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of where we're at with the status of COVID-19 in Massachusetts. And so that has a big effect on what we do as a school located in Massachusetts. So if we're looking at the infection rate here and the positive test rate, and one of the things that you may have heard a lot about is flattening the curve. And so Massachusetts is one of the states who has been able to flatten the curve. And that's what you're seeing in these 2 graphs here. And so because of that, the Commonwealth has been looking at ways to start school and phase in school. And DESE has asked us, DESE, the Department of Education, to really look at 3 sort of plans. One is an in-person plan, one is a remote plan, and the other is a hybrid plan. So when we attempted to look at all these 3 plans, the first thing that we did is sort of what plan would be best for us and what was best in that plan. So in-person plans we know would be best for creating community, for the social learning, for students to have that consistent, high quality in-person adult support that we know is so important. When we're looking at a remote model, this is best for students who can attend. This is really best for the safety regarding COVID-19, being that students can be asymptomatic and spread COVID-19 to each other, to other staff members. So remote is best for to contain that. And then we have the hybrid model in situations in which the space and the staffing do not allow for consistent 3 to 6 feet of distancing or other mitigating factors. A hybrid model is something that we could do where we maybe break the school up into half or thirds and have kids, students come on different sort of rotating either days or weeks. Next slide. So we had to do a feasibility study to see how feasible it was to enact these models in our current space. What we found is that looking at sort of the guidelines that were given to us by Governor Baker, that we could do 3 feet or 3 feet plus of social distancing between chairs, resulting in significantly smaller class sizes, and that there was also a potential for us to use other spaces in our school as classrooms. We don't anticipate having enough to run a model where everyone could come back to school and we were able to do social distancing, but we could run a model where we did a hybrid where some students come to school 1 week or a couple of days, and then other students come on another day, and we would have enough space to do that. Staffing. So in all of these models, it requires that our staff has a level of flexibility because we would be moving in and out of models, and class sizes would be different in hybrid models. So it does require a lot of flexibility on the part of the staff. And, you know, we have a great staff, so we're hoping that that's something that we're going to be able to make work. Some faculty may need to be remote, so we have to also take into consideration our staff health and medical needs, and it may be that some of our staff members may need to be remote. Materials. So it requires us buying additional materials or repurposing some of the furniture to be able to make things work. And then there's some technology requirements, a Chromebook for each student. From the March to June portion of last year, we were able to get Chromebooks to students who needed them, but we are now looking to go 1-to-1 where every student would have a Chromebook, and we would ask that the students use that Chromebook for remote, hybrid, or even in person, and that they weren't using their other devices, so we would be going 1-to-1. And that every teacher would have a computer. And that was something that most of teachers and staff had last year, provided by the school. Next slide. So our priorities. This session will provide you with information regarding the safest way for us to return to school. And our aim for the 2021 school year is to provide all students with a healthy and safe learning environment. That is really important to us. That is number one. To provide consistent quality opportunities for all of our students, learning opportunities for all of our students. to focus on the social emotional well-being of our students, offer an instructional model that meets the needs of as many families as possible, and to make a plan that can change quickly based on the COVID-19 data in Massachusetts and our local communities. It is really important to say that things are changing so quickly that we have to be sure that whatever plan we put together and that we decide to start with, that we need to make sure that we can transition from that plan to a hybrid plan to a remote plan, depending on what the state of COVID-19 looks like in Massachusetts and our surrounding communities. Thank you. So family surveys, thank you to all the families who were able to complete our survey. Your input is a very important data point that we use when we are making decisions. So families' top concerns were health, physical safety, and loss of a loved one. And in a pandemic, that makes total sense that health and safety are number one at the top of most of our families' minds. 48% of our family prefer a hybrid model. 26% of our families preferred a fully remote model. 79% of families are very concerned about sending students back to school. And so we were taking all of those results and information into consideration when we're putting together our plans. In a fully remote setting, changes that families would be looking for were more live classes, more Zoom lessons, and more relevant classwork. And that was a lot of the conversations that I had with parents, either via phone or via email, was about the amount of interaction or live class interaction that they thought their child needed or their student needed to be able to understand the classwork or the material. So we heard you on that one also, and that was something that we wanted to make sure whatever plan we move forward with had that component. Many families said that it was difficult for remote learning to keep track of assignments and sharing devices. And that's why one of our decisions was to make sure that we were going to go one-to-one and make sure that all students had a Chromebook that was provided by us. And then we looked at better ways to track assignments and to help families help their students be more organized in tracking assignments. So plans if we were to bring people back into the building. Health and safety are number one. We are in a pandemic at this point. And as we look to welcome our students back to our school, the priority is health and safety for all of our students and our staff. To address health and safety, it is important to implement many strategies to mitigate and reduce risks related to COVID-19 transmission. So in looking at that, we looked at 4 key components: masks, hand hygiene, physical distancing, and cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfection. So when we're looking at masks, we were asking that students and staff, or we would be asking that students and staff bring masks home to school from home daily. In an event that a mask is needed, COA would be able to provide masks for students or for staff. Students and staff must wear the mask that covers their nose and their mouth, and we would make any accommodations that would need to be made for students who are unable to wear masks. Next slide. Hand hygiene. Hand hygiene is another important piece of mitigating this pandemic. So all students and staff would be required to engage in frequent hand washing. When hand washing, individuals must use the soap provided. So we would have touchless soap dispensers that we would be asking people to use to wash their hands for at least 20 seconds, wait for lather, rinse thoroughly, and we would be removing all of the blowers from the bathrooms and using individual paper towels to wipe your hands off. And then also when hand washing is not feasible, we would have hand sanitizer available. We also have installed touchless hand sanitizers that are placed in key locations around the building. So in an event that you can't make it to the bathroom, that there's also a touchless way for you to practice hand hygiene. Physical distancing. 3 feet plus of distance between individual chairs. Approximately closer may happen in some occurrences. We're thinking that these occurrences would be less than 10 minutes. And we're really talking about sort of like the passing in the hallways, or maybe passing a student if you were leaving a room to go to the restroom or to go to another room. We are trying to cohort students and divide them into smaller cohorts so they are not interacting as much with different groups of students every day. Creating one-way pathways in our hallways, in our stairwells, and in our cafeterias, also to reduce the transmission and reduce the passing of other individuals. Assign seats for all students, so they have a seat that they would sit in every day and that would be their same seats, and then only forward-facing seating. Cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting. City and Hill will follow protocols for sanitizing and disinfecting school spaces, including high-touch spaces multiple times throughout the day and following the DESE and CDC guidelines. It's important that we've gotten a lot of guidelines and a lot of guidance on how we should be cleaning and disinfecting, and we will be following all of those guidelines. Personal protective equipment, or PPE. You may have heard that term used a lot. City and Hill has purchased all required PPE to support staff and students for the start of our school year, and we are committed to purchasing additional PPE if the need arises to purchase anything else. And that includes the masks, the sanitizers, and anything else that we would need as protective equipment. Next slide. I'm going to now hand it over to Principal Laura Edward to talk about families' roles.
Had to unmute myself. Hi, everybody. I am Laura Edward, the principal. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is what your role is as students and families. So we are asking that family and caregivers check students and students check themselves for symptoms every morning, and this would include a temperature check. And so the CDC provides a list of common symptoms that come with the virus, and we would ask that people check that every single day. Staff will also be required to conduct a self-check for symptoms every morning as well. This check is really critical and serves as the primary screening mechanism for COVID-19 symptoms. It's sort of the first cutoff. And then we will ask that families do not send their children to school if they exhibit any COVID-19 or flu-like symptoms, or if they feel sick. So, you know, part of any plan that we have will take into consideration students who are unable to come to school. And we want to make sure that in order to keep everyone safe and healthy, that if you're feeling at all unwell, that you do not come to school that day. Another piece that is critical to complete is your returning student annual form. So we'll be sending those out. And on that, we are asking all parents and guardians to provide at least 3 primary and emergency contacts in case your child becomes sick at school. And I want to note that this is that is a higher number of contacts than we have asked for in previous years. And I'll get to why later on this slide. We're also asking that all parents and guardians update all medical information, including any permissions or current medical diagnoses. Children's immunizations must be up to date. Per the CDC and the Department of Public Health, flu shots are highly recommended for all students and staff. And then this last bullet point is something new that we are introducing for this time, which is we are asking all families to have a 30-minute plan for 6 students. And that is a plan to have your student dismissed from school within 30 minutes if they become sick while they're at school. So we will have a full-time nurse on site to see students. And if a student becomes sick in school, we want to make sure that we are able to get in touch with somebody and have that student dismissed from school within 30 minutes of reaching out. And that's part of the reason that we're asking for 3 primary and emergency contacts, because we know that the main primary contact is not always the person who's most available to come pick a student up or available to receive a student who is dismissed. So that's why we're asking for more adults on board for every student. And then next I'm going to talk about our plans if we are fully remote. So we believe that the schedule will be similar to an in-person model. We know that students will attend all of their classes on Zoom if we are fully remote. That's part of the reason for getting every student a Chromebook and having every teacher with a laptop. Students will continue to meet with their advisor on Zoom, and advisors will be calling home more frequently as well. The assignments that students receive to complete will be nearly identical to an in-person model. That really the biggest change is the delivery of instruction, that it will be through a computer instead of in person. Students should use school provided Chromebooks, and we say that because we will be updating the Chromebooks this summer. We've begun with some of them already, and we are installing software on the Chromebooks that students will need to access the learning in their classes. And as of right now, we are not sure if a remote model would be 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday, or 5 days a week. It could be either one. And then next, I want to give some assurances, and then Sonia will talk about the timeline. So in any model that we do, this is in a remote model, in a hybrid model, or a fully in-person model, attendance will be taken daily, and attendance will be taken for every class. We are going to upgrade from Google Classroom, which we used last spring, and instead we're going to be using Unified Classroom. So Unified Classroom is linked to PowerSchool. It's how families already access grades and attendance and behavior information for their students online anyway. So one thing that we discovered this summer is that they can also provide a lot of the educational platforms that Google Classroom did. So we'll be moving to Unified Classroom for all of that. In any model that we do, grades will be given for participation and progress towards standards. So grades, students will still be graded on the work that they complete and have to meet quality standards in order to progress to the next level. And then I've mentioned this already, but all students will have and have to use Chromebooks provided by the school. And this is if we're fully remote, this is if we are hybrid, and even if we're in person, we intend to have students using their Chromebooks in the classroom, almost like a textbook that they carry from class to class with them. I want to talk about student health for a minute. So our vision is to create a safe school culture that focuses on personal, community, and societal well-being as well. I mentioned this earlier, but we will have a full-time nurse, and that's no matter how many students are in the building. So even if we do a hybrid model where we only have some of our students in the building, the nurse will be here full-time. And then the same goes for mental health services, that no matter how many students we have in the building, or even if we are in a fully remote model, our mental health counselors will be available to the students who require services. And then lastly, I want to talk about professional development and the preparation that we are planning for faculty and staff. So teachers and staff will take part in 10 days of professional development that happen prior to students coming back to school. This will include, but is not limited to, Zoom training. So we are having people from the Zoom company come and train our administration on all the things that Zoom can do and all the features that it has, and we'll be training our teachers on that as well. We are going to be giving all teachers Unified Classroom and PowerSchool training so that they can be trained on how to use those platforms to assign work, collect it, and grade it. We will be giving training on how to lesson plan in a remote setting. We'll be giving COVID-19 protocol training, and this is for, this is really for any model, fully in-person, hybrid, or even remote. We'll be giving training on protocols for if you think that you or someone else has COVID-19. We will, as we always do, give training around special education and ELL learning. And then finally, as always, we'll be giving classroom management training, and that will include a virtual piece. So best practices on how to manage a classroom virtually. So again, this is not a complete list of all the trainings that we'll be doing, but these are the ones that we wanted to highlight for you. And now I will turn it over to Allison King to talk about special education.
Hi everyone, I'm Allison. I am the Director of Specialized Services. I oversee special education and English language education. So regardless of what model we're using, special education services are going to be provided for our students with disabilities through a free and appropriate public education. We will be fully implementing the tenets of IDEA. Our special education department will prioritize and provide in-person and or virtual, live, individual, or small group instruction to all students in accordance with their IEP. We'll provide in-class supports for in-person learning as required. We'll be communicating with families regarding services for your students, what your students' schedules are, and provide you with notification for all of those things. And any IEP meetings or 504 meetings that we hold this year, we'll be doing virtually so that we can reduce the number of in-person contacts and visitors to the school. In the spring, due to closure from COVID-19, our in-person assessment for students reevaluating for IEPs was not possible due to health and safety concerns. So we worked with our families to delay those timelines. So what's next for the fall is that safety protocols will be put in place, including plexiglass dividers, masks, shields, and other PPE, so that we can continue evaluating students for special education services with any necessary accommodations. Unless as a parent you request a further extension, we will resume testing when school starts. And again, our meetings will take place virtually until further notice to protect the health and safety of our staff and our families.
Thank you, Allison. So where are we now? We've given you a lot of information, and we definitely will post this. So if anyone missed anything, because I know this is a lot of talking, but where are we now? Massachusetts has flattened the curve, and that is an amazing thing, and it looks very promising for us. And I think that that's why we are able to engage in these conversations about students coming back to school in a hybrid model or coming back to school in a full school model. But we also know that there has been a recent uptick in positive cases, and that we're watching that carefully. We do not get information before parents, before families, before anyone else who can watch television, be on social media, or listen to the radio. So we hear about changes in policies and changes in the data just in real time, just like you. And so we have to be able to react to that. So we are watching it carefully. And that's why it's really important to know that we are giving our best guess of how we would like to approach starting the school year, but we can't 100% guarantee anything, because if things change, we need to be able to change. Again, if our guiding policy is to make sure that students and staff are safe. More than likely, nope, go back, sorry. More than likely, we will have a remote start with a shorter day. So we are looking to start remotely. And we are looking that we would start remotely, and then we would reevaluate around Indigenous People Day. So that's, I think, October 13th or so. We would be looking at seeing how, at that point, if we were able to come back in a hybrid model for our students, but we would be starting remotely. City on a Hill will be submitting our plan to DESE. This says August 10th. We just received news today that that's been pushed back a little bit. So actually submission of our plan will be August 14th and not August 10th. This is something that the Department of Education is requiring all school districts in Massachusetts to do, which is submit a plan. And of course, we will be sharing that plan with you. I just say that because this says that the plan will be communicated with you at the latest at August 12th. And we'd have to push that back a little bit because now the plan is not going to be due until August 14th. But we will be communicating with you in the next week about what plan we are moving forward with, the details of that plan, when school starts, and what everything is sort of going to look like from a student and a family perspective, as we are still working on that. And then the last one is that all of our decisions will be informed by science and data. We have to look at what is going on nationally, what is going on in our state, and what is going on in Boston locally, and make decisions that are going to keep our staff and keep our families safe, because that is a number one importance to us. Then the next piece of that is to make sure that we are giving the best high quality education we can to students. So we are weighing both of those, but we are going to be making our decisions and informing our decisions based on science and data. Next slide. So here's our timeline, and this is sort of broken up of just what we talked about. This is the second of our family meeting. We had another family meeting last night, and we got to hear from some families, and I think some families are on again, so it's good to see that. We have already submitted a draft plan to DESE last week. Our final submission plan was August 10th until about an hour ago, and that was August 14th. We'll continue working on what the processes and protocols are and sort of more the details of that plan, and then we'll have a follow-up communication with families by the end of next week. So now we have questions. So we have a question and answer function. If you look at the bottom of your screen, it actually says Q&A. And so if you have any questions, please feel free to type your questions in there. We have some time left, so we'll answer as many questions as we can now in real time if we have answers. And if we don't have answers to them or we can't get to all the questions, we'll make sure that they'll be addressed in either another webinar or in our next communication. So if you have questions, please feel free to type your questions now. So there is a question that says, so the school days hours are going to change. We have found, and this is sort of looking at summer school as a measure, and also just as some of the research, that it is really hard for students to be on Zoom for an entire day. So we're not looking for the start of the school day to change, but it may be a slightly shorter day just to give kids a break from being in front of the Zoom screen for 8 hours. So really won't be a big change in the school day. It may be a little shorter. So we'll be going back to school full-time anytime this school year. The question is, will we be going back to school full-time anytime this school year? I don't have that answer. That's one of those questions where we're gonna have to let the data and follow the science. My hope is yes. I absolutely want to be able to get back into school and have everybody back into school and start living the new normal, because I don't think we'll ever go back to the normal that we've known prior to March. But that's not a question that I have an answer to because we really have to see where this pandemic goes and what the next steps are. So I don't know. How will attendance be taken and recorded and factor in the sickness? So that is one. That was a really good question. How will attendance be taken and recorded if we factor in COVID sickness? Actually, we have the Department of Education is doing a webinar tomorrow that's going to talk about how they want us to factor in attendance and factor in even tardiness. Just to think about if we're asking parents and we're asking students to, you know, make sure that they're not sick or things like that before they come to school, that then maybe tardies have to look different. So we're actually going to get guidance from the state. I think the seminar is tomorrow about what that looks like, but yes, we do have to factor in that if a child is sick and has COVID symptoms, we are asking that they don't come to school, and we don't want that to weigh against them as far as their grade or their attendance. So there will be a specific policy changes around attendance because of this. Should we start purchasing uniforms? I'm going to tell you not to start purchasing uniforms now. Not because I don't think that we'll wear uniform, is because we have a lot of brand new uniforms and we are going to give uniforms. So don't purchase anything right now because we are going to give things to students, brand new, not worn uniforms. So before you start purchasing anything, I would hold off and wait to our next mailing because it'll give you some more information about that. And that's the same with school supplies. In the next mailing, there will be materials that you need for your particular classes. We are working on scheduling now, so we have to put everybody in the schedule to know exactly what materials list a child would get. So our next mailing next week, we'll start talking about that. The general school supplies, I mean, even though you'll have a Chromebook that's provided by us, if your student, you know, a lot of students love to write by hand. So if notebooks and pencils and things like that, the regular school supplies, you should be fine with being able to purchase. But you can also wait, that we will send a materials list in our next mailing. A lot of uniform questions. I'm gonna skip them for right now and go to the other ones, and then I'll circle back about uniforms. So will there be a way for students can communicate with teachers and they will reply on time? There will be a way for students to communicate with teachers. We're going to be asking that teachers have office hours and that those office hours are published, but also that we are having live classes. So you can also communicate with your teacher during your live class. And that's something that we didn't have in the March to June period. So every class did not have live sessions. And this remote time, all classes will have live sessions. Will virtual work be set up differently from what it was previously in the past spring? It was not the most user-friendly and the pictures were not clear for reading. I think Laura talked a little bit about that we are going to be moving from Google Classroom to a different platform that's Unified Classroom, and that we found isn't actually a better platform. So I am hoping that it is clearer and more user-friendly than Google Classroom, because this is a platform that is especially made for schools to use. Google Classroom was sort of made like this would be great for you to use as an addition to your class, but Google Classroom never was set up for what most schools ended up having to use it for. They never thought that we'd be using it in this way. It was really set up to be in addition to what was done in a classroom, not as the classroom. So we're hoping that the Unified Classroom is a better system for students. Also, Unified Classroom, the grades will read straight into their grade book. And so then students will be getting their feedback around grades a lot quicker, and it'll also be in the grade so parents can see how whatever work they are doing is affecting their grade positively or negatively. So we're hoping that Unified Classroom is better. Feel free to jump in, guys, if there's any questions. Is there a set time and date for students to pick up required Chromebooks? We are working on that, of course, because we can't have everyone here at one time. We want to get the schedules done first before we start handing out the Chromebooks, because based on your schedule, there will be certain things put on your Chromebook for what you need. And also we want to give you your Chromebook. We want to give you uniform. We want to give you, any other material. So if you need a particular English book, we want to be able to provide you with that at that time. So we do want to wait until we're closer to having your schedule done, or a student's schedule done. So when a parent or a student comes to pick up their Chromebook or pick up their package from the school, that they're receiving multiple things that they need, and that we're not asking parents and students to come back and forth. So we're looking for like this orientation time to be closer to September, but we don't have an exact date yet. And we also have not gotten all the Chromebooks back. So if there's people on the call who knows that their student has a Chromebook, please bring the Chromebook back. We're not taking it from them. Everyone is going to have a Chromebook, but we want to make sure that everything is set up properly on the Chromebook. And to do that, we need you to bring it back. So we also are working on cleaning up all the Chromebooks. Will students have to access each teacher they are? Students will have access to each teacher that they are assigned. And that will be through multiple ways, through their Power School, and also through the Power School Unified Classroom, through the office hours. They will have be able to do that. I think I missed one.
There's a couple scheduling questions that I can jump in and answer.
Sure.
So one person asked, how do you know which students will be doing remote and which students will attend in the building when the time comes? And then there's another question about how do we know, when will students know who their teachers will be? So both of those depend on us finishing the scheduling. So we started earlier this week with scheduling. Scheduling is, it's a very big job that can take a couple weeks or more. So, and it's an even bigger job this year because we've got to do a schedule for being fully remote, a schedule for being fully in school, and a schedule for a hybrid model. So it's taking us a little bit longer this year. But as soon as the schedule is completed, then we will be communicating that out to all students and families.
I think we have a question about, there's some cleaning questions on here. How often are classes going to be clean when students are subject to attend classes? There is guidelines about how often we have to clean classrooms. This is one of the reasons that we're also trying to cohort kids, so they're not going to be so they won't be switching in and out of classes to make sure that, of course, we're reducing the transmission or the amount of time that you are with other students. So it will be cleaned according to the guidelines. We now clean classrooms at least daily, but that may have to change because high touch points do have to be cleaned more often. Are we fully staffed this year, and will classes have teachers? So we are, all the classes have teachers except one, which is a math class. But we are hoping that we will have the math teacher. There's an offer out for one right now. So we're pretty confident that we will be fully staffed for all of our teachers, and that is awesome. So we're really excited about that. You have to get negative tests before you go back to school if we are going up. I don't know. There's a question about negative testing. So do they have to, is there a way that students have to show that they have negative tests before they go back to school? Right now, there's no guidance around what that looks like. That's another reason that we are opting to start in a virtual model, because there is some guidance missing about what that looks like and how we bring students back into the building. So we did believe that it would be safer at this point to not bring the students back into the building and start with this remote way, because there hasn't been guidance about what should we be requiring for students when they come back into the building. And so we're still waiting on some of those answers to questions ourselves. Talks about how will lunch be served. Again, this is a guidance around DESE has told us how lunch has to be served. All lunch has to be prepackaged. Lunch, all students have to be 6 feet apart when lunch is served, which means that we wouldn't be able to serve lunch in just our main cafeteria area. We would have to be serving lunch in that area and also using classroom per the guidance from the Department of Education.
And I'll jump in. There's a question, how many students are going to be in each class? So again, that's something that depends on scheduling, as always. So sometimes we've got larger classes, sometimes we've got smaller classes. So while I can't give you a definitive number, what I will say is that we will never have, unless Massachusetts is cleared for people to be closer than 3 to 6 feet apart, that we will never have more students in a classroom than we can have and still keep them at least 3 or more feet apart.
We also are a little, lucky as being a small school. We don't have really large classes, so we're not looking at classes of 35 kids and breaking them in half. Our traditional class size is between 15 and 22, and if we were to be going back, we'd be going back in a hybrid model, so it will be half of that. So we're a little bit more confident that when we get to a hybrid model, that we will still be able to have pretty small classes, because we would not be bringing 22 kids back. We would be bringing 11 kids back into a classroom. There will be a lot of rules around social distancing. So that is going to be, and we're looking for sort of best practices right now, talking to a lot of other schools. Mr. Taylor's been talking to other superintendents and other school districts. Myself and Laura have been talking to other principals and other teachers around what are they thinking. We know kids are going to be kids. And that is one of the things that we've heard from a lot of parents and a lot of teachers in general about. We can have rules, but there is going to be a lot of guidance about what are the best practices. Everyone, including people who have computer access from home, need to go to school to get a Chromebook, or they don't have one. Everyone, including the people who have, oh, my question went away. I think this is another question about the Chromebook.
I'm sorry, Ms. Pratt. I was answering the question while you were reading.
Oh, sorry.
The parent asked whether or not if they had personal computer equipment at home, whether or not they could use that personal equipment instead of using the Chromebook. And so my response to the question was no. That we've got to use. Every student is required to use school-issued Chromebooks, because we can't put the school-issued software on personal computers.
Yes. Thank you. Laura, I think you had something, Laura?
Yep, so a couple of people asked what day school or classes will start. So it is tentatively scheduled to start on Tuesday, September 8th. And I say tentatively because, again, we are in a position where we are always sort of ready to move with whatever guidelines the state gives us. But as of right now, the plan is for school to start for students on September 8th.
There's some issues about we'll be getting different Chromebooks because last year they had like some Chromebooks had issues. If your Chromebook had an issue, please let us know. So we did have to order some new Chromebooks because we didn't have enough. That's one thing about we're definitely trying to very quickly get Chromebooks out last year. But this is why we're asking to get all the Chromebooks back to make sure that we clean them and put the software on them to make sure that they're running at the best capacity that they can be running. So I'm hoping that families that didn't have a good experience with the Chromebooks will have a better experience with the Chromebooks after we get them back with some of the new ones that we had to purchase and that we're actually putting our software and things onto the Chromebook. And there was a question about helping seniors. This is tough. This is a tough time to be a senior, absolutely. And a lot of the things that we would be doing this year, and I think Mr. Taylor talked about this last night, so I definitely think that he can talk about it, is that we have to be looking at how do we expose our seniors to college and the college process and what that looks like in a more virtual way, because college campuses are not doing tours. College admission officers are not coming to the school and speaking with large groups of students anymore. We can't have you get together in a large group of students, but there's definitely virtual things that can happen. There's virtual tours. There's webinars like this where we would have, where college admission officers can come and speak to a class in this type of way. So it really is the issue with seniors and with all of our students is one that all the school districts all across the world literally are facing right now. So there's definitely more virtual options to do things than there has been before because it has to be. So we are looking at that, and college counseling is looking at that. They're asking, will there be an option to request remote only learning for our child? So at this point, since we are going remote, all of our students are going to remote. When we go into hybrid, there has to be some option to how we would do remote only, and we are developing what that program would look like. And then there's a testing. Is there going to be ACT, SAT, and MCAS this year? We have no idea. Those are, for MCAS, it's a statewide test, and the other two are national tests. We don't know what they're going to look like this year. And I think that that's part of sort of everyone is in the same boat. They're trying to figure out what that looks like, what is the best way to do it. And also talking about, is it fair to have these tests this year and count towards admissions with all of the disruption that has happened with students with COVID? If you were sick and you missed a lot of the school year, or if your school district just had to close and there was nothing that was going on. So I wish I had a better answer to the testing question because that's sort of out of our hands. We will do what is required of us. If we have to prepare students for MCAS and there's going to be an MCAS, we will be preparing you and you'll be ready to take it. If ACT is something that we're going to be able to take part in and have that, then we'll be preparing you for that. But right now, those sort of things have to tell us if they're going to happen. We don't know. Uniform. Lay that for last. At this point, we have not discussed fully what it looks like. If we're in a virtual model, there is no need for you to wear anything but your shirt, with your uniform shirt. And we have a lot of uniform shirt options to be able to give students some new ones as we start the year, but we are still a uniform school, so I'll say that. What are the steps being taken to make sure the Chromebooks are being returned and passed out again are not contaminated? Well, there's a lot of research about sort of how long something can live on the Chromebook. So we are not turning on any sort of material. So we're not turning the Chromebooks right back around to students. We are getting the Chromebooks, we're cleaning the Chromebooks, and then we are putting all the software on the Chromebooks before we give them back out to anybody. And that's another reason why it's going to take us a little longer. we'll talk about uniform when it's get closer. School and how. We have enough uniforms for the entire school. If there's some real specific questions about guidance counselor and things like that, we will talk about sort of that with the seniors, because I think that that's very specific to you. And one question, will you have to have cameras on? Yes. So we are going to be asking that during live classes that students do have their cameras on. They may not have to have their camera on for the entire class period, depending on how the class is broken up. You know, they may be working in a breakout room. They may be working on something where they're looking down so they can turn their cameras off for that amount of time. So it doesn't have to be like you're staring at the camera for the whole entire time. But we do ask that we want to know that the student is there. We want to know that the student is engaged. So we are going to be asking that for at least some portions of the class that they have the camera on. And so, yes. Your questions were great, and they do really help us know sort of what we should be including in our next communication. I want to say that this is the beginning of a conversation. This is not the end. So we did this last night, and some of the questions were the same, but there definitely were some different questions. So we do know where some of the communication needs to go and where we want to get you more information on. On this last slide, it also has my email address, Sonia Pratt. It has Principal Laura Edwards' email address, and also Director of Specialized Services, Allison King, her email address. If you have questions that you didn't get to ask here or that come up a little bit later, feel free to email us those questions. If we feel like those questions are one that answers that the whole community needs, we can make sure that we include them in our next communication so that everybody gets that answer. We don't want you just to be the only one to have the information. And if you have specific special education or ELL questions, then Ms. King is probably the best person to direct those questions to. But she also has a wealth of knowledge about everything, so you can direct other questions to her too. All right. So we're going to go ahead and start closing out our webinar. Again, you should be expecting communication from us by the end of the week. And please check the website frequently, because we